back! If there's anything I think SNK has done better than most other companies when it comes to fighting games, it's creating and establishing new protagonists. Seeing how renowned Terry Bogard became upon his debut, it seemed like an impossibility to replace him as Fatal Fury's main guy, and then along came Rock Howard. While he didn't exactly replace Terry Bogard, nor did he really ascend to the level of being one of the many faces of SNK, he was the furthest thing away from being a flop. Rock even eclipsed Terry in a Garo popularity poll at the time of his debut, and he's still loved by many fans even today. You could even say SNK exhibited their ability to make cool new protagonists in a relatively niche series like Samurai Shodown. Haomaru and Nakoruru started off the franchise quite strongly and are commonly in the conversation about recognizable fighting game protagonists. From Samurai Shodown 3 onward, new protagonists would be established as the focal points of the game's storyline, with the exception of Samurai Shodown 6, which, while it has 2 new protagonists, it was a non-canonical dream match game. Unlike Rock Howard, none of the Samurai Shodown protagonists really eclipsed Haomaru or Nakoruru in terms of popularity. However, most of them have achieved some significant level of favor from fans. Then of course, there's SNK's flagship fighting game franchise, the King of Fighters. Though the game was conceptualized as a crossover of several established SNK franchises and they could have easily settled with Terry as the main protagonist, the company felt the need to have a fresh new face lead the charge. It was a smart move, as Kyo made for a proper representative of SNK looking to foray into a new age with the franchise. Come KOF's second arc, known as the Nest Saga, K-Dash was created to be more of a dark, reluctant hero to contrast Kyo. The Ash Saga was the third arc, spearheaded by the eponymous, rule-breaking antagonistic protagonist. Though K-Dash and Ash Crimson obviously didn't replace Kyo, both have garnered significant praise from fans, managing to stand out and make a significant impact on the series. And then along came the fourth arc's protagonist, Shun'ei. While he did manage to carry on the tradition of being different from previous protagonists in terms of personality and having slightly different powers, he also stood out in some not so good ways. Unfortunately, he really didn't get much of a chance to shine compared to his predecessors. How did it come to this? Well, let's see if we can find out in a brand new series on the channel. This is Doomed from the Start.
Doomed!
Now, just to be clear, this isn't meant to be a 100% dunking on Shun'ei video or for any other topic we might cover in future episodes. While this series is meant to cover things in fighting games that were seemingly a disaster from the get-go and ended up as such, I do want to give credit where credit is due, if possible. In case you're not aware of my personal opinion of Shun'ei, I've always said that he's a weirdly designed character with a pretty cool moveset. The visual effects on his moves got a great upgrade in 15, even though his climax got downgraded in the same game. I'm kinda jumping ahead of myself here since we'll go over mistakes that SNK made with Shun'ei later, but yeah, I went there. The whole thing starts off and goes on decently, only to end on a whimper. And for the umpteenth time, I know it's a reference to the manga, to which I say, so? You know what else was in the manga? There was no Rock Howard, Yamazaki, Blue Mary, or Vanessa, and yet they are all in or on their way to KOF 15. Tizok makes a comeback in the manga, yet we still got KOD in 15. The point is, I feel this was better left in the manga. His previous climax was leagues better than this. Still, that alone doesn't take too much away from the touch-up. I don't just label a character as a failure over one underwhelming new move. Regardless of how I personally feel about his new climax, it's a good thing that his playstyle is fairly beginner-friendly. There's no insanely crazy inputs, and he does good damage with very simple combos. The air dash gimmick may be a little out there to beginners, but they do make him all the more effective and make his gameplay pretty unique. As I mentioned earlier, I give SNK credit for making Shun'ei one of the nicer protagonists in terms of personality. All of his predecessors have exhibited some degree of arrogance and edginess, whereas Shun'ei is more humble and reasonable. I feel like SNK realized they went insane with how antagonistic Ash was, even though there was a method to his madness, and wanted to go in a completely different direction in the next arc. Additionally, Shun'ei was portrayed as more of an underdog compared to the previous protagonist. Kyo ran roughshod over damn near everybody, even beating Goro and Benimaru to claim leadership of Team Japan. If their 14 intro is saying anything, Shun'ei constantly loses to Meiten-kun when they spar. SNK clearly wanted us to sympathize with and cheer for him. And that's really all I can say about what SNK has done right with Shun'ei. And seeing how that's not a lot, you may have an idea of where this is going. If you feel there are some other things SNK did right with Shun'ei, please don't hesitate to comment below and let me know. So let's get straight to one of the most off-sided criticisms of Shun'ei, his design. So many people have ragged on the man's design, and it just never stopped. There's been a bit of debate over what inspired Shun'ei's design. I've heard and seen people point to a fashion trend in China called Feijuliu. This style apparently is about creating your own sense of style to be counterculture. Some have even lampooned this fashion trend, claiming it's mostly associated with people with no sense of style or those with low self-esteem. If you look it up, it may remind you of some of what you may know as emo, punk, goth, or even visual K. I can kinda see some parallels, but most of what I've seen looks edgier and wilder than Shun'ei's design. There's even claims that Shun'ei's name is a play on the Japanese word chuni, which is short for chunibyo, which is a term used to describe the embarrassing behavior of teens, such as having immense delusions or desperately wanting to stand out. Some have even connected this pun to Feijuliu, as standing out is considered the key reason for adapting said fashion sense. There are some people who deny this fashion style has connections to Shun'ei at all. I'm not a fashionista, and it's a bit tricky for me to find any sources that I can clearly understand, so if anyone wants to fill me in on this in the comments, definitely don't hesitate to share. What I will say is this: I think solely blaming Shun'ei's design for his unpopularity is a bit reductive. I recall many people not liking Ash's design in the beginning, but to be fair to Ash, I remember that was more of a regional thing, as Ash had a much more positive reception over in Japan when he debuted. Whether or not you liked Ash's design, his loose cannon personality and stylish gameplay made people feel something. Shun'ei was mostly met with apathy for the most part. Everyone always talks about Shun'ei needing to ditch the headphones, ditch the jacket, roll down the pants leg, lose the bandages, and he'll be decent. If the manga's anything to go by, since people love bringing it up when I trash his 15 climax, if Shun'ei did those things, he'd be much more than decent, if you get what I'm saying. In a way, I actually agree with Sugar Punch design works when talking about his color scheme. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'd be totally fine with Shun'ei's design if his default color scheme was that of some of his alternates in 15. Like, look here. In case you don't know, this is L Blue, a character from Jin Doji Wong that some fighting game nerds speculate was an influence on Shun'ei's design. While I don't entirely buy that, there are a few similarities. The point is, design-wise, he looks cool, and though you could call his color scheme basic, it doesn't go too insane with the variety. I think the design problems lie more in what SNK did behind the scenes when creating Shun'ei. If you recall my 10 facts about Shun'ei video, we learned that SNK's initial plans were for Shun'ei to have a stereotypical Chinese design. I don't know if there are any concepts of that design out there, if his kung fu suit was based on it, or if it was the very design itself, or maybe it's one of these sketches included in the 14 art book. I don't know. What we do know is that Shun'ei wasn't designed by one of SNK's veteran designers, but someone who Kuroki-san confirmed was a new designer. The reason for doing so was to introduce KOF to a new generation. Now on paper, I get it. Perhaps they might have thought putting a veteran designer at the forefront would have made the new protagonist come off incredibly passé and would have made the company seem out of touch. However, appealing to a new generation will take more than just getting a new younger artist to create the face of a new age. Shun'ei's designer reportedly also designed Athena and Sylvie in 14, and both of those characters look fine. Like, you have to really try hard to make Athena look bad. While Sylvie's design is kinda out there depending on your taste, at least there's a great amount of cohesion with her look in terms of the color scheme, as well as having inspiration and playing off of said inspiration effectively. So clearly, this designer isn't bad at what they do. It's just in the eyes of most fans, Shun'ei just wasn't doing it for them. This point is fairly minor. When you look at the KOF 15 roster, most of the characters that got redesigns were long-established fighters like Athena, Shun'ei, Benimaru, and Iori. Antonov is the newest character that got a glow-up, and a good one at that. SNK had to have known about the generally lukewarm reception to Shun'ei's design. They could have given him a bit of a redesign rather than just a good polishing. If you ask me, this is the gravest mistake SNK has made with Shun'ei. In the company's 2016 Gamescom interview with Ryan Hart, Kuroki dismissed Shun'ei as the main protagonist, but claimed that he would be, quote, involved heavily in the storyline of KOF 14. Okay, here's the problem. Trying to straddle the fence between whether he was the main protagonist or just a key character in the story was a pretty damning sign. This is far from the first time SNK has been uncertain about pushing a new protagonist in a fighting game, as the company wasn't initially all in on Rock Howard being the face of Garo. Pretty interesting considering that some of the designers that helped Rock also assisted with Shun'ei's visual development. Despite their hesitancy, SNK established and pushed Rock as Garo's main protagonist. Many people loved him then and still love him to this day. Now you're probably thinking, even if SNK were really confident about Shun'ei, it wouldn't have changed anything. People would have still hated him. It's the design, man. Well, I don't entirely disagree with that thought. In fact, I think it's pretty solid reasoning. The point is, SNK clearly were not confident in Shun'ei. I don't know who they thought they were fooling with that answer to Ryan Hart's question. I mean, like any KOF storyline enthusiast, even Ryan Hart himself knew Shun'ei was the main protagonist, despite their efforts to hide that fact. In most cases, if the company isn't gonna treat a character like a big deal, then why should the fans? Sure, you could point at the American sports team as an example of characters SNK doesn't take seriously that fans are heavily invested in, but that team was A, clearly and obviously not meant to be taken seriously, and B, not main protagonists. 4 years later, in the KOF 15 teaser trailer, Eisuke Ogura stated that SNK were unsure if Shun'ei was the main protagonist of 14, but were confident in naming him as such in 15, which brings me to another mistake SNK made with Shun'ei. This point was basically the byproduct of the previous one. SNK makes this new character, they aren't super confident in him, and deny he's the protagonist when he's clearly meant to be, so of course SNK doesn't really present him like he's a big deal. For starters, he initially wasn't featured prominently on promotional material. Now I know it's his status and position in the story that makes him the protagonist rather than how often he's plastered on promotion for the game. Still, I'm sure you're familiar with the basics of advertising. Whatever a company perceives as being more marketable gets frequently and prominently featured on packaging, posters, video ads, and so on. In regards to Shun'ei, he's on the main cover of KOF 14, but isn't front and center like Kyo, nor is his likeness as large as Iori's. The steel case for the game features just Kyo. The 3 OST discs, Kyo, Iori, and Mai. The OST album art, Mai. The game's slogan is "Burn to Fight." Shun'ei actually uses pyrokinesis. They could have easily put him front and center. SNK eventually did prominently feature Shun'ei on some packaging, albeit the Ultimate Edition of KOF 14. Why didn't SNK go with this cover in the beginning? I don't think it's a bad cover. Say what you want about Shun'ei as a character, but I'd absolutely hang a poster or a wall scroll of this in my room. Speaking of, I do the same for the poster of the 15 cover art as well, which I think portrayed Shun'ei much better, as he and Isla were definitely the center of the game's story. Also, credit where credit's due, Shun'ei at least bested the big bad in 14. SNK could have easily derailed Shun'ei's push and had Verse be taken out by Team Japan, however the latter did win the KOF 14 tournament. While Shun'ei more than likely wasn't going to eclipse any of the 3 previous protagonists in terms of popularity and impact on the series, I still believe he could have been a really good protagonist. To a degree, I do think Shun'ei is a bit overhated by fans. Again, I think it's a little harsh just to blame it all on the design. I mean, take a character like Sylvie for instance. I can see why people thought her design was pretty freaky and all over the place. However, Sylvie has loads of personality in her animations and attacks. Shun'ei lacks a lot of that. He has really good animations, but there wasn't really anything there to really hook lots of players. Also, SNK did a poor job at making the fans care about Shun'ei. When Ogura admitted the company wasn't ready to push him until they started on KOF 15, I believe it. It totally shows. While KOF 15 wasn't really the big breakthrough for Shun'ei I was hoping for, you can still see some hints of development in his character, and we finally got to learn more about his origin. SNK should have just been more upfront with presenting Shun'ei from the beginning. Most of the fan base had already not cared about him in 14, and seeing how viciously fans kept burying him, getting them to care come the next game was going to be an ungodly uphill boss battle. Seeing they are looking to end this saga with KOF 15, giving Shun'ei only 2 canon games, yeah, it's looking like SNK is rage quitting the Shun'ei project, just like those SNK bosses have made us do at certain times, which is funny considering Rugal is coming to freaking KOF 15. But back on topic, I actually like Shun'ei. Would he make my top 50 favorite fighting game characters of all time? Nah, he'd be on the lower end of my top 100 maybe. He might even fall short of that. Just as I'm not shy to admit I like Shun'ei, I'm not hesitant to critique him. If this is really the end of the Verse Saga as we know it, and SNK isn't trolling us or anything, Shun'ei will unfortunately just be seen by many as something of a cautionary tale on how to not handle a fighting game protagonist. Call me what you want, but I stand by this. Shun'ei, my man, you deserve better. But yeah, that's all I got for this one. What do you all think? Like, do you like Shun'ei? Do you dislike him? Do you think he was a total failure? Do you think he was overhated? Let me know below, and let me know what you think about this series, and would you like to see another one? I want to try to experiment with some more different types of content, and this was actually pretty interesting and fun to put together. Thank you for watching, and of course, I am Chris Lotus, signing off. Y'all take care of yourselves. Be safe out there. Be cool to each other. Jumanji.